I want to talk about the principles of economics. And this is, you released this as a textbook. And there was one part that I really want to talk about. And it's this concept that time preference is key to understanding money. And what do you mean by that? Because I think that I think whether Breedlove, which is a good friend of mine, right? His whole show is what is money. You ask people. I was on Gary Leland's show like earlier on today, and he was like, "What like Nico? What is Bitcoin?" And I'm like, "What is money?" Right? So we kind of like go down this rabbit hole of what is money, and then your argument is you can't really understand money without understanding time preference. So why is that? And how does fiat play into this?
Yeah. So one of the good things about writing this book independently, being out of academia, is that I could just write it with the reader in mind rather than committees of stuffy academics in mind. So I'm not trying to impress academics. I'm not trying to keep my job. I'm not trying to get published in prestigious journals that nobody reads, which is essentially what academics are doing, which is why they are effectively intellectually neutered, because they're writing for research grants and for committees of other academics, which makes them completely unreadable for the normal human being with functioning brain cells. So for me, having had the success of the Bitcoin Standard and developed the readership of people who read the Bitcoin Standard and who are eager to read my new work, I wanted to take advantage of that so that I could write the textbook that I'd always wanted to write, that I'd always wanted to teach, and to write it from the perspective of how do we explain this economics properly? How do we explain economics properly in a way that is not out there trying to argue with the Keynesians, therefore buying into their frame. It is teaching economics from scratch in a logical way. And this was really the best thing about getting to write this book. And one of the most important things about being able to write this book in a Bitcoin fashion, in a fiat-free fashion, I should say, in a regular Austrian logical way, was to be able to explain money and not trying to explain money by trying to refute the Keynesian perspective, which is idiotic garbage anyway, but just presenting the Austrian perspective and then building on top of that. Because for me, if you approach this topic this way, you understand money as it emerges on a market, you understand economizing in the market, how people economize, how people act, and you understand how different actions, and this is how I structure the book. So I begin by explaining the Austrian foundations of analysis. We look at human action, value, and time. And then with that basis laid, we look at how humans economize. So I present the ways in which humans economize. We work, so there's labor, there's property, there's capital, there's trade, and then there's money. And that's something that emerges on the market, just like all the other things emerge on the market, because people recognize that using this technology in a certain way allows us advantages. And so you understand the emergence of money on the market, which is very important from the Austrian perspective. And the Austrians are the only ones that understand money as a product of the market, because the Austrians are the only ones that are essentially not paid by central banks. If you look at all of the other schools of thought, all of their economists get their paycheck from the central bank. And so lo and behold, they all agree with the central bank that you can't have money with the central bank. Well, the Austrians don't get their paychecks from central banks. And so therefore they don't agree. Or I should say, no, it's not because they don't get their paychecks. They don't agree because they have functioning brains between their ears. And therefore they don't get paychecks from the central bank. And they have to make do with other ways of financing themselves. And that's generally not worked out very well until Bitcoin comes around. And now we have an army of toxic maximalists who will buy my books and allow me to work independently rather than work at a university. So another ad here, if you want to have me keep writing, make sure you buy my books. So explaining money as a market phenomenon allows you to understand it so much better than the kind of, and then poof, the government says, let there be money, and then we have money, which is the idiotic way in which Keynesians explain it. And so once you understand it as market phenomena, For me, it is quintessentially important to understand time preference as a part of this phenomenon, because what money does, the importance of money, one of the many important things that money does to us is that it allows us to provide for our future selves. Money is the most efficient mechanism for providing for the future, because in the same way that, money solves the problem of coincidence once today, money allows me to trade with you and with everybody else, because we don't have to trade with one another by finding what are the things that I want and what are the things that you want, and let's find somebody who has what you want and what I have, and then I need to do several exchanges in order to get to you. We solve that problem by all of us, everybody, buying and selling everything in exchange for one good. That's just a very powerful solution to that problem. And so in the same way that it solves the problem of trade on the market, and it emerges on the market out of human action rather than out of any kind of centralized design, in that very same way, it solves the problem of providing for the future, because you don't know what you're going to be needing for the future. You don't know how you're going to be spending your money in the future. And so the easiest, most effective, most efficient way of providing for yourself in the future is to save money, because you save money and then you accumulate it over time. And then money, again, solves the problem of coincidence of once. You don't know if you're going to need 5 years from now, if you're going to want to buy a house in LA or New York or Chicago or Texas or whatever. You don't know if you're going to need to be buying a car or which car. You don't know what you're going to be doing. So you don't have to buy everything today and save it for the future. You just buy the money. And then when the future comes along and you need to be spending those money and you need to be buying the thing that you want to do, you just take that money and you exchange it for the thing that you want. So it's the most effective way for us to solve the problem of providing for the future. And so when we're able to provide for the future with money, that allows us to make decisions about the future more concretely. It makes the future less uncertain. It helps us provide for the future. So therefore, it lowers our time preference. And I make an argument which is kind of, I think I would say, original, which is that the hardness of money is like a control knob for our time preference. The harder our money, the more we are able to plan for the future, the less we discount the future, the lower our time preference, the more future-oriented we become. And then the flip side of that is that when the easier the money is, the more the money loses its value, the hazier the future becomes, the less certain the future becomes, the less we're able to plan for the future, the more present-oriented we become, and the higher our time preference.